Hi, I'm Michael Correa, and this is Psych Exam Review. In the previous video, I talked about how we might categorize motivations into different categories of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in this video, we're going to look at an even more general distinction we can make between different types of motivations. And this is the distinction between intrinsic motivations and extrinsic motivations. So essentially, we're asking the question about a motivation of why did you do some behavior? And we can have one of two responses. Either you did it because of some internal sense of satisfaction for doing that behavior. That would be an intrinsic motivation. It's coming from within you. Or we could say that you did the behavior because of something external to you. Something that's an extrinsic motivation means it's based on external rewards or external punishments. Now, when we start thinking about this distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, we can actually find an ironic effect of rewards. And this brings us to a classic study by Mark Lepper, David Greene, and Richard Nisbett, conducted in 1973. And what Lepper, Greene, and Nisbett did was they observed preschool students and they observed drawing behavior. So when the kids had some free play time, the researchers observed how often do the kids draw? How much time do they spend drawing? And then, after observing, getting a baseline of the drawing behavior that was occurring, they introduced awards. They introduced a good player award that would be given to the students who drew pictures during the free time. And then, after a short time of having these rewards, they discontinued the reward program. They said, sorry, we don't have any more good player awards, but you can still draw as much as you'd like. And then they continued to observe the drawing behavior. And what Lepper, Greene, and Nisbett found was first, some baseline of drawing behavior. And then, as expected, when the rewards were introduced, we saw an increase in the drawing behavior. Right? Suddenly, the kids were drawing like mad because they wanted to get this award. And this is exactly what a behaviorist psychologist would expect. They look at this and say, yeah, of course, you provide reinforcement for a behavior, and the behavior increases. By definition, that's what reinforcement does. And then when the rewards stopped, though, rather than just returning to the baseline, what they found was that it actually dropped below. So now the children were spending less time drawing than they used to before the study began, right? Before these rewards were introduced, right? And so we might think, if we reinforce the behavior, that would encourage you to do it, and we'd think maybe you would continue doing it after the rewards stop. You'd learn how much you like drawing, or you'd get better at it, and so you'd enjoy it even more. But that's not what Lepper, Greene, and Nisbett found, right? They found what's referred to as the overjustification effect. And so the idea of the overjustification effect is that extrinsic rewards can replace or maybe displace our intrinsic motivation. So in this case, the kids were drawing because they enjoyed drawing initially, and then they were drawing for rewards, right? Not for their own creativity or their sense of accomplishment. They were drawing because they wanted to get that external reward. And in fact, the researchers also had some judges who were blind to the conditions of the experiment, so they didn't know when these drawings were created, and they were just shown these children's drawings, and they were rating them, how much creativity, how much effort went into this drawing. And what happened was the drawings that were produced during this reward period were rated lower than the other drawings. In other words, the kids were less creative. They were just dashing off these drawings just so they could get that award, and they weren't really putting much effort or thought or creativity into what they were producing. Now, we also have a study from 1999 where Edward Deci, Richard Costner, and Richard Ryan looked at a number of different studies, and they concluded that it did seem to be the case that tangible rewards can reduce intrinsic motivation. And I say tangible rewards here because that doesn't include verbal praise. So it doesn't seem to be the case that if you just tell someone, oh, great job drawing, that you're going to ruin their love of drawing. But if you start giving a tangible reward for it, then you might see this overjustification effect occur. And now we can think more broadly about what this means. What does this mean for people who get involved in a certain career or a certain field because they really enjoy it? They have an intrinsic motivation to create artwork or to play music, or they play a sport for the love of the game. Right? We might wonder, well, what happens when we start providing external rewards for these behaviors? What happens when an artist starts selling his art, or a musician starts getting paid to play, or an athlete starts getting paid to compete? We might wonder whether this is going to undermine their intrinsic motivation. And we can also think about students and education. We might wonder about programs like rewards for grades programs. This is where local businesses might offer discounts or even free products to students who have high grades on their report card. So you can bring your report card, and if you have A's, you can get a free ice cream or something like that. We might wonder whether these programs are actually undermining the intrinsic motivation of these students. So in the short term, they may appear to work. Students might bring their report cards to these businesses and show that they have more A's, and they want to get these free products. But what happens when they graduate? What happens when they're no longer in school? Are they still going to be motivated to learn on their own? Or are we teaching them that learning is work? Learning is something that you do for external rewards rather than a process of growth and discovery. So we might think that in the short term, we could start rewarding something like reading. So we offer these external rewards for every book that a child reads, and wouldn't that be great? It will encourage more reading. But we might wonder what happens when that program ends. What happens when the kids now are on their own and they don't get a reward for finishing a book? Will they be as interested in reading? Will they see it as something that's enjoyable in its own, for its own sake? It's a process of growth and discovery and learning new things that you didn't know before. Or will they see it as, well, you read books so that you can get these rewards? All right, so that's the basic idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and the overjustification effect. And so in the next video, we'll start looking at the problem that we don't always get to do what we want. There's some things we have to do. We don't want to do them. We're not intrinsically motivated, but we still have to do them. And we'll also look at the idea that sometimes we don't get rewards right away. We have long delays between the work that we do now and when the benefits are actually accrued. And we'll also look at one ironic effect of punishment. So I hope you found this helpful. If so, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks for watching.